Objective Analysis Hunters Guild Red Hood Edition. Let's get it. Welcome back everybody to the channel, of course. This is the Objective Analysis on the RT Anime channel. And today we got a new series that we're talking about that is supposedly ending very soon, and for good reason, in Hunters Guild Red Hood. I have a lot of opinions about this series, so we're going to be talking about this, of course, and we're going to be objectively analyzing using the 5 categories as always: characters, plot, world building, themes, and art/animation. So let's dive right into it. First things first, let's start off with the characters. Now, the characters of the series is nothing too crazy. Some of the highlights, of course, is Vilou, Grim, and Debonair. Honestly, in my opinion, my favorites are probably Grim and Debonair, because they seem like they had the most personality and the most interesting abilities and capabilities throughout the series. Vilou is the main character of Hunters Guild, but he hasn't had anything that truly distinguished himself from any other main character I've seen in a series. He had kind of a sad story of how he became who he wanted to become, as someone who becomes like a top tier hunter against these werewolves and everything. But his personality was very simplistic. He was just a good kid for the most part who liked to help people. Nothing crazy, but is rather simplistic at the end of the day. Grim and Debonair seem to have a lot of potential with their abilities, with Debonair being able to raise the body heat of her own body, which is crazy, and how that's some sort of hex that they were going to dive into hopefully in the future, but now not so likely now. Of course, it's kind of iffy. And then Grim, who seemed to be the most interesting with her hex becoming young out of nowhere, definitely had that Red Riding Hood vibe for a reason. Her name's Grim, and if you know like folk tales, that name is very synonymous to very important things in different types of mediums. Like, she had a lot of potential behind her character, of how she had a stern, get work done personality. She seemed like an amazing female lead type shonen character, of course. All the other characters are, didn't dive into them too much, and they seem some pretty decent with some backstory kind of explaining why they did what they did, but nobody really too complex, nobody really that interesting in my opinion. So if I had to give a characters the rating, I'll give them a 4 out of 10, just below average. Next, we're going to be talking about the plot, and oh my goodness, the plot is something else. Now, let's start off with some good things to say about the plot. The plot started out great. It focused on taking on werewolves who are a big threat in the world. They could have different transformations, different forms. They can blend in with humanity, different abilities, different powers. And this is going to be like the main threat that the core cast of characters, that the main characters are going to take on throughout the series. Not only will they be taking on werewolves, but there's the added element of this being a folk tale type world, with things like Red Riding Hood being a very important character, Cinderella eventually getting introduced, or a character named Cinderella, the big bad wolf, the huntsman, a lot of different fairy folktale type things that can make the story even more interesting than it was already kind of portrayed at that point. However, the plot definitely took a turn, but to say it didn't have potential at the beginning is utterly lying. It had an extreme amount of potential. Now, the plot definitely started going downhill fast, and this is probably one of the biggest reasons why Hunters Guild is failing as a series, and that's because it really became way too convoluted, way too meta, way too fast. Matter of fact, the fact that it became meta in the first place was weird for a battle shonen type series. You could definitely have a parody series being very meta, but it didn't seem like Hunters Guild was set up to be that way. But in this plot, for some reason, it became a story about how there's a book that controls the world and controls the folktales in the world, and you can write folktales in and write folktales out. So it became very meta, and Vilou as a main character was apparently the antithesis of the world itself, and his introduction to the story will destroy the world. And because of Vilou, Grim was supposed to be the main character, but because of his existence, basically kicked Grim out of being the main character. Like I said, way too meta, way too fast, way too convoluted. It's so poorly done, it's ridiculous. And this was all introduced in the first like 30 chapters. It's bad. It's not good at all. Like, this is not how you write a consistent story. Maybe they got sped up at some point, but even before all that meta stuff, the entire battle to get your hunter's license or whatever took way too long, and it was very boring. It seemed like they were having a lot of struggles on the direction of the story, and then they went on a weird direction after that, basically trying to finish up a story way too fast, it seems like. With that said, the plot rating I'm giving Hunter's Guild Red Hood is a 2 out of 10. Basically trash. It's just a little bit above 1, which is utter trash and utter garbage. But the reason why I'm not saying it's a 1 is because it did have a lot of potential, especially at the beginning. It had so much potential, but because it kind of ruined it all from what we did see, it is definitely a 2 out of 10. Next is the world building. Now, the world building for the most part is not too crazy. There wasn't a lot of areas that was truly introduced other than the main village that the main character was introduced at, the main area that they trained for their hunters exams, of course, and some interesting history and lore with dragons. And even though it's dumb, but the fact that there was a book that played into the world as well, there were decent things. Using your axe and how there's a special material to take on werewolves, it had potential. Like I said, it had some interesting aspects to it, but for the most part it has nothing crazy in terms of world building. So I will say with what it does have, at the very least it's a little bit below average, so I'd say 4 out of 10. You could definitely do something with that from everything they did introduce, but like I said, the plot completely fumbled the bag, so they didn't do anything with all that stuff they had already introduced. Next here is the themes of Hunter's Guild, and the themes are terrible. There's really no big themes. There's some minor themes, of course, with some specific characters, but we're focused on the big themes that grasp upon the audience and that they will forever hold into their hearts and live out their lives following said themes potentially. And Hunter's Guild Red Hood doesn't really have that. For the most part, the only things they really talk about is teamwork and being a good person for the most part. Other than that, nothing really crazy. I'm giving this a 2 out of 10. You know, being a good person is at the very least a theme, so it's not utter trash and non-existent, but there's really no complexity in the themes they've introduced thus far. 2 out of 10 is very deserving. Last but certainly not least is the art. There is no animation. It does not have an anime. It will never have an anime. But the art for Red Hood, or Hunter's Guild Red Hood, has been one of the highlights of the series and one of the biggest reasons people tend to want to read the series, because they're absolutely intrigued by the art itself. It is very well done for the kind of story that they were portraying. It seemed very captivating with the folktale type imagery as well. So the art has to be at the very least a 6 out of 10, better than average for the most part, and it definitely enticed people. It would be better to see more things, but for the most part we didn't see anything too crazy from the art itself. But since it's getting axed early, that's probably why. So with that said, this is my 5 ratings, of course. So we're gonna have to get a final rating to determine how good of a series Hunter's Guild Red Hood is. So with that said, drum roll please. Hunter Guild Red Hood is a 3.6 out of 10. Yes, below average for sure. It's definitely not an okay series. It's pretty bad, if I'm being completely honest. So if you plan to read it, I mean, go ahead if you want to read a bad series, but to say it didn't have potential in the beginning would be utter foolishness. With that said, this is the objective analysis of Hunter's Guild Red Hood. Hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know the next series you guys want me to pop in. Of course, let me know your opinions about Hunter's Guild Red Hood in the comment section down below. So hope you guys enjoyed. Take care and peace.